Please. Thank you.
Hey, Dad.
Doesn't matter what colour, just everyone wants one, and then we can get started. Now I know you're familiar with some parts of the water cycle. You'll have done it in science, but they're looking at a slightly different aspect of it. They look at the water cycle a little bit differently to how we do here in geography. So just bear with me. I'll explain how the text works, what happens in this piece, then I'll read it to you, and then we'll start going through sentence by sentence and we highlight as we go. All right? So there's no fear. This is, as I say, just an introduction, and it's explaining what the water cycle is and how it works and the key steps in the process. One of the really important things to learn about the water cycle is that it is a connected process. It's like everything on our planet. The whole of our environment and our world is connected. No part exists on its own. And the water cycle is an example of that. All the parts of the cycle are connected. We call that a system. When all the little parts add up to make one big unit, we call that a system. And when there are lots of steps in that system, it's a process. So this text is telling us that the water cycle is a system where water moves around the planet. It's held in lakes, like whereabouts in Cobar do we see bodies of water? At the Res, at the Newey, the Youngie's full of water at the moment. It looks beautiful. Some of the smaller ones are empty, but the oceans, dams, lakes, they hold water. We know what happens when the sun's energy heats that water up. It changes it into a gas and it rises into the air. As it rises into the air, it cools down again. It changes back from a gas to a liquid in a cloud. As that cloud gets denser and denser, it can't hold on to the water anymore. So that water is released and it falls back to earth as rain or hail or sleet or snow. When the water hits the ground, it either runs off, out here in the quadrangle, as soon as the water hits the concrete, it moves away. But if it falls on the grass on the oval, some of that water is actually going to soak in. It's going to filter in, just like when you're making coffee and you put it through the coffee filter and the water moves through the soil and soaks in, and that's what keeps all the trees and plants alive and fills up the soaks where you can drink at. What's the first thing we've got to look at?
The heading.
The heading. That's going to give us the clue, isn't it? It's going to tell us what this is all about. The water cycle. The water cycle is the circulation system which carries water from the oceans through the atmosphere to the land and back to the sea. Water is transferred between various storages such as oceans and the atmosphere. The basic processes in the system are evaporation, condensation, precipitation, infiltration and runoff. So that's a pretty technical kind of a text. There's lots of technical terms and difficult ideas in there. But all it's really telling us is that out there in the world, water travels around and around and around. And the same water that we drink today is the water that dinosaurs drank. It's the same water. The water cycle is the circulation system which carries water from the oceans through the atmosphere to the land and back to the sea. So you can see it's describing the cycle, isn't it? What are we talking about in this text?
Water cycle.
The water cycle. Highlight the water cycle. Now, that word cycle tells us that things are moving around. But looking at our text here, if we keep reading in the sentence, there's another word that tells us that it's going around and around. Circulation. It even sounds like circle. So what is it that's circulating? What type of system? Water. So let's highlight circulation. So we know we've got water moving around and around. There's a word here that tells us that all the parts of this water cycle are connected. Remember I was saying that when we've got little parts and they're all connected together, they form a type of a, have a look in the sentence, and it tells us that this is a type of, it's a circulation system. Thank you, Brandon. Okay? And that word system tells us that the things are all connected. So all the parts in this cycle are connected in a system. The text tells us that this system does something. Gail, can you see what it is? Thank you, Ryan. What is it that this system does? It carries water. So let's highlight carries water. Where is it carrying the water from, Ryan?
Oceans.
Carries it from the oceans. So where does it go to next, Ryan? After it's been in the atmosphere, it goes to?
The land.
To the land. And then the writer's given us a clue here just to emphasise the fact that it's a cycle. They've given us another word that shows us that the water has returned to the beginning. What's the one word in that sentence that they're telling us it's gone to the beginning?
Sea.
Back. And where has it gone back to?
Sea.
To the sea. Let's highlight back to the sea. So it's described a circle. That's why we call it a circulation system. All right, let's have a look at this next sentence. I'll read it to you again. Water is transferred between various storages, such as oceans and the atmosphere. However, no water actually leaves the circulation system. All right, Dominica, what are we talking about in this sentence? What's the key thing we're talking about? It tells us at the beginning, water. So let's highlight water. Now we know, again, right at the beginning of the sentence, the writer tells us what they're writing about. Water. What's the water doing? It's telling us that it's moving. And what word have they used to talk about moving? Transferred. Okay, that's a better way of saying moving. Now that we're in high school, we can start to use language like that. Water is transferred. Now it's transferred between different places where water is held. And there's a word in that tells us that they hold water. They've stored water in a dam or the ocean. And what word have they used? Storages. I mean, that's not a word that I would use in normal life. But in this situation, that's a good technical term because it talks not just about oceans and dams and lakes, all the ways that water is held and stored. Goes on to give us some examples. 2 examples of where water is held. What's one example of a storage? The ocean. Thank you, Gail. The ocean is a storage. And the other example, Jordan, of a storage?
Atmosphere.
The atmosphere. How is water stored in the atmosphere? Where do we see water in the atmosphere? If we look in the sky right now,
Clouds.
it's all we can see, isn't it? Yeah. Clouds. And we know that they're really just water and dust just hanging about in the air until it gets cool enough or dense enough to release its water and fall. Now the writer's talking about how water is moved around. They've used a word now to tell us, but. What's the word? All this water is moving around, but. However, thank you. Was that Jordan, was it? Cheers, Jordan. So when we see words like but or however, we know that the writer is changing direction. This thing happens, but, okay, what is it that happens?
Water.
Let's have a look at the next part of the sentence. However, thank you. What does it say about the water? How much water are they talking about? No water. And no water actually does what? Leaves. So no water actually goes from this water cycle. And what technical term have they used to describe the water cycle?
Circulation.
Circulation system. So again, the writer doesn't keep saying water cycle, water cycle, water cycle. Okay? When we're sophisticated writers, we can use all different terms to describe the same thing.
The water cycle is the circulation system which carries water from the oceans through the atmosphere to the land and back to the sea.
Thank you.
Water is transferred by various storages, such as oceans and the atmosphere. However, no water actually leaves the circulation system. The water cycle is powered by the energy from the sun.
So we need to be able to turn what we're reading into things that we're writing. So we'll do our note taking, then we can start to turn that into full sentences and you can write on your own. What's the title of this one, do you think, Tori? What are we going to call this report? Straight out of the text here, we're going to call this the water cycle. Can I ask someone to come up and do some writing for me? Let's go through all the terms that we've highlighted. What's the first term we've highlighted there, please, Dominica? Come and write it up. Maybe you could just write water cycle. Yes, please. If you could, we'll just do it up here so we've got lots of space on the board. Yeah. So the first point we highlighted was the water cycle, and what things happen in this water cycle. Yep, that's the way. Now they've given us another term for the water cycle. Ryan, can you come and write up another technical term they used to describe the water cycle? What was it, Gail? Circulation system. And both those concepts, the idea of a cycle and circulation, tell us that water is moving around and around. That's the way, Ryan. Just write it next to it if you like, system. All right, come on up, Joylene. What's the next point we've talked about? What happens in this circulation system? What does it do? Carries water. So let's make a point there. Now this water that's moving around through the system, what makes it move? What is it that gives this whole process energy and power? Ooh, what did we say?
It carries water. No way.
What did we say this whole process was powered by? Energy from the
Sun.
From the sun. That energy from the sun allows water to be carried around. We highlighted in the text where it is that the water is carried through. Please, Gail. Carried through the atmosphere. This is confidence. Well done. So I'll put a little dash in to show there's words missing. And then write nice and clearly atmosphere, ocean. A little dash, that's it, atmosphere. Excellent. So it's gone from the oceans, drawn up into the sky and the atmosphere. Where next, Tori?
The land.
The land and...
Back to the sea.
All right, well you do that. Do land dash back dash sea. Is that saw, is it, cutting out? Oh dear, do you want me to do some? Yeah, I'll have a crack at cutting out because I want you to put these in order of what happens in the water cycle. What happened at the doctor? This word back is a good one for us because it really helps us see that this whole thing is happening in a cycle. It's starting in the oceans, up into the sky, back around down to the land and back into the ocean. All right, let's make another point. What's this second sentence telling us about? About how water is moving from place to place. So who wants to come and help me take notes here? Jordan, please. A dot to show that we've started a new sentence. So what is it that's being moved around? water. So let's write that down. Put a dash in. And what's the better word than moving they've used here? Transferred. That's right.
Wait,
Yep, transferred.
no, wait.
Can you see it there? Yep, good man. Great. So we know that the water's moving around. Brandon, did you want to come and take some of these notes with us, mate? You right? What about Ryan? You've had a crack, have you? All right, Dominica, up you come. Are you going to have a go, Paige? That's okay. Now we talked about these storages, and it is a strange kind of a word, but it just basically covers all the different places where water is held. Dams, lakes, oceans, seas, rivers, where else? Lakes, ponds, streams, creeks, gale. It gives us some examples of places where water is held. Could you write up the 2 examples, please? So these words hopefully are helping you to flesh out the ideas that are in those diagrams. And you can actually get a sense now of how water is moving through this system, through this cycle the whole time. And Dominica, what are our last couple of points from this sentence? We know we're talking about... Yep, could you put those up for us? Because it's the sun that drives the whole process. It provides the energy. It's the heat of the sun that actually gets those little water molecules moving faster and faster and faster until they change state. They stop being liquid and they become a gas, and they're able to escape from the surface of the water and rise up into the sky. What we're looking at doing here is talking a little bit about the notes we've got, coming up with some different ways of expressing it, and maybe rearranging the ideas in the sentence so that when you come up to the board, you're going to write a different version of this, your own version of this sentence. Because if we just rewrite this, that's against the rules. Okay, it's like handball, it's like a forward pass in rugby league. It's like handball in soccer. And it's like holding the ball in Aussie rules. It's against the rules, you'll get pinged. You have to do your own work. This is the process where we're teaching you how to read. Well, first of all, Dom, we need to discuss it. Okay, we need to hear some ideas and start shopping it around before we jump up and write. Good writers, boys, always don't rush in and do the first thing that comes to their mind, okay? So what are we trying to, what's this sentence telling us?
The water cycle.
So it's naming the system, isn't it? And what's this telling us happens, Dom? And it tells us where the water goes, the different places it goes. So how are we going to say this without copying the writer's words? What are we going to call the water cycle?
The water. Just like the water around. Circulation system.
What's happening to the water? What's it doing? What do we say the water is doing? It's
Making.
Is it staying still? So what's it
Always
doing? It's
moving.
moving. So we could say that water is moving in a
Cycle.
cycle. Okay? What's happening in this cycle? It's moving in a cycle that takes it from where to where?
1, 2, 3, 4.
Okay? So it's gone from the oceans to the atmosphere, then it goes to the land and at the end. So what do we say when something's at the end? It's happened at the last point, at the end, you reach the grand final. Okay, so the final step is back to the sea. So water moves in a cycle that takes it
The ocean.
from the oceans to the atmosphere, then the land, and
Back to the sea.
the last step, finally
To the sea.
to the sea. So who wants to come and have a crack at writing that sentence up? All right, Dominica can have first go, and then you can have next go. All right, Dom, the pen's out there. See how you go. Don't have to write at the very top if it's too long. We can extend the page. Put a heading up. You call it. We'll just call it the water cycle. Yep. Yes, please. So the title is just the water cycle. Now we're all gonna have to help Dominica remember, because this was actually quite a long, complex sentence. Yep, excellent. So what did we say? We're talking about water, didn't we? So what did we say? Water is what? What was the water doing? Was it sitting still? No. Moving. Is it moving sometimes? Is it moving? Always. So water. No, we're going to write a sentence now. So start across here and just come across. So water is always moving in a cycle that does what?
Carrying.
That, what did we say? It actually
Pick.
started with a T, we said it
Transfer. Take.
takes. Okay, that takes. Takes what?
Water.
We're going to say water again?
Takes.
It,
Liquid.
well, let's think about it. Now we want to refer to this thing called water. What are we, it's not a he or a she, it's a thing. What do we call things? We don't call them he, we don't call them she, we call them it. It. That takes it. Takes it where from?
From ocean.